We don't make mistakes. We have happy accidents.
By the train's decree, we're headed to Fulgora. And I've already finished the research to do so. Before I can go to Fulgora, I feel like I have to make sure everything is okay at home. It would be incredibly annoying to have to go back and forth between planets, so I'm making sure all the blueprints and such are in order. And speaking of blueprints, this is the design I've settled for. I built it in a 64x64 square, so it would fit nicely in my train network. I was planning to talk about how the blueprint works here, but 2 minutes of me talking about this blueprint at the very start of the video seemed like a bad idea. It's probably better to just skip it for now and put it at the end of the video instead. I can tell you that it's mostly about a new blueprint parameter system, so if you're interested, there is a timestamp in the description or you can watch the video to the end. And now that I'm reasonably happy with my designs, I use them to set up large-scale rocket production. Large scale in this context seems to be about 6, which is a perfectly fine number. In fact, I've heard it's above average. This is the platform I'm planning to use to travel to the other planets. You can probably tell that it needs a bit of work. And that work is going to take a while because I have decided in my instant wisdom that this platform needs the best engines I can produce. But to speak honestly, do I really need the best engines? Yes. And for some reason I also need the best tank I can make. And to be clear, I'm not making it to bring it to Fulgora, I'm just making it because I want to. And while we're speaking of tanks, your construction bots can deliver items and equipment to your vehicles, making the process of filling the equipment grid and inventory much easier. And yes, since they can fill the inventory with items, you can use them as a primitive requester chest. Since you need space science to make requester chests, this is very useful for making your first rockets. Note that I'm pretty sure that you have to be in map view to do this. Anyway, I actually made a tank because I wanted something to do while I'm waiting for a platform to get its resources. One of the things that's going to take a while is waiting for the ammunition to get up there. You're going to have to shoot down a lot of asteroids to get to another planet, and with uranium ammo, you're looking at about 3 shots per asteroid. You can send 25 magazines per rocket, and every magazine has 10 shots, meaning that you need to send up 1 rocket per 80 asteroids. And since I'm planning to set up a brand new base on Fulgora, I'm going to need a lot more than just ammunition, meaning that I have to wait even longer. If you're scouting outside your base, bring your best radar and a few solar panels, and just plop them down whenever you need to get a better view. And while we're speaking of a better view, take a look at this incredibly thick biter nest. That kinda reminds me that I have to go home and take care of a few things. And a few minutes later, I'm ready to give the biters their gamma ray facial. And long story short, my ADHD won once again. I ended up spending a few hours clearing out a huge amount of biters, completely forgetting about my platform. And now, after about a total of 800 worms and nests, it's finally time to build my space platform. Your space platform needs to collect asteroid chunks to make fuel. But if you let the grabby hands grab every chunk they see, you're going to fill up the inventory very quickly. You can solve this by just throwing the chunks you don't need back into space, but I instead made a bit of circuitry that tells the grabby hands what they're allowed to grab based on what's on the belt, and the inserters around the crushers grab resources as I need it. Here's the combinator settings if you want to build this yourself. Your engines are going to need fuel and oxidizers to work, which can be made using the resources in the asteroids. The 4 chemical plants I'm using here to produce the fuel is not nearly enough for 5 engines, but most likely your platform isn't going to be moving all the time, so you can build up a buffer while you're waiting, if you remember to make some fluid tanks to buffer it in. Which I of course do remember 20 hours from now. I'm going to jump ahead a bit because I spent way too long fiddling with the platform. You're going to see it now anyway since I'm going up there. I didn't quite manage to avoid the floating box in space syndrome. For next episode, I think I want to make a new design that's a bit more interesting. I haven't received all the items I requested yet, but I can always send the platform back on its own to get anything I've forgotten. I did remember to bring a cargo landing pad, so probably I'm going to be fine no matter what. And that's more than enough procrastinating. Let's see how fast these engines can go. I have absolutely no frame of reference, but 250 km per second is probably pretty good. And I just ran out of fuel. It seems we have a bit of time now, so I want to say a few words about my workflow on this series. In order to stop myself from just playing the game all the time, I've decided to record everything until it's time to go to a new planet and then stop. And then be very strict with myself and not play the game at all until I'm done editing. And in addition, I've also tried to avoid everything Factorio related on the internet. When I finally finish editing, I boot up the game and record the trains picking a new planet. My point with all of this is that I'm probably very far behind everyone else who's uploading space age content to YouTube. And since I'm actively avoiding all the content that's being uploaded, I'm probably repeating a lot of stuff that's been said a million times already. Hopefully that hasn't been too annoying so far. Just to be clear, I didn't go into Space Age entirely blind, I did read the blog post before it released. But I've been careful not to get spoiled on how other people have solved the challenges on the different planets. We're going to reach Fulgora now, so I'm going to shut up for a moment.
Frank, what the hell are you doing, man?
That's my character. I'm the Trashman.
There's a lot of garbage to go through, very much like the editing I'm doing right now. I'm going to request some stuff from the platform to get myself started. My options for power generation is very limited. What little water there is on the planet is only found as ice. You will be able to find a lot of fuel in the trash, but without enough water to boil, steam engines aren't very viable. And when the planet's so far away from the sun, solar panels are basically worthless. We're basically left with one option, and that's to harvest energy from the storms that happen nightly. But to do that, we need to build a lightning rod first. We will need steel, copper wire, and stone bricks. Stone bricks is the only one of those that you cannot find in the trash. Like on most planets, finding regular stone isn't very hard, so I used that to build a furnace and then requisitioned some carbon from the space platform. There is another way to get stone bricks which I didn't notice while I was playing. The lightning attractors that are already on the planet can be deconstructed for 2 stone bricks each. It was kinda hard to notice that fact, considering you don't see any resources when you mouse over them, and you want to keep them around to protect you while you figure things out. I also didn't realize at first that the lightning attractors that are already placed here don't provide any power generation. We're going to need to use a lot of accumulators to keep the machines running during the day. Thankfully, the days are very short. Now that we have power, we can finally start doing some real work. I wouldn't say that I know what I'm doing yet, but I at least have a logistic train network that is functioning. From what I've seen so far, there seems to be two types of islands. The small islands have a lot of scrap on them, and the bigger islands have little to no scrap. I tried looking a bit for an island that's bigger than this, but they all seem to be about this size. Surely, I won't find bigger islands if I just go a bit further, so I won't. I assure you this is completely unrelated, but it's a weird cloud shape just like the number 4's shadow. What could it mean? These two islands are very close together, so I'm going to send the scrap to the island on the right for recycling, and then send the recycled products over to the island on the left for sorting. The problem now is that the provider stations I've designed for my LTN network does not work with more than one item. Let me show you what's wrong. My train stations only activate and provide their items if there are more than 81 stacks of items in the chests. In order to know how many stacks there are in the chests, we feed the number of items in the chest to an arithmetic combinator. And to find the stack size, the selector combinator receives information from the constant combinator that this station deals in iron plates. The selector combinator then looks up the stack size of iron plates and sends that information to the arithmetic combinator. Now we just divide these numbers and we get the number of stacks in the chests. And now we can inform the train station and the decider combinator that we have more than 81 stacks. This enables the train station, and the decider combinator informs the network that there's a train station that's ready to provide iron plates. But scrap recycling isn't that simple. That's because we can get all of these items from scrap recycling. And we cannot set the train station to supply any of those items because that will confuse trains down the line. And that's not to mention the fact that these items don't even share a stack size. To solve this problem, first of all let's get rid of this. And instead use this scrap recycling icon to tell the train network that we're ready to provide. And then connect the chest to the selector combinator to get the stack size of all the items that are present. Now we can use the yellow each wildcard to divide each signal on the red wire with each signal on the green wire. This will output the number of full stacks we have of all our items. And we can use this number just as we did before to enable the train station and inform the train network that we have recycled scrap that's ready to be picked up. The only problem now is that the inserters tend to struggle a bit at the end trying to fill the cargo wagons completely. I didn't feel like making a lot of circuitry to get the inserters to behave, so I ended up just modifying the interrupt the trains are using to be a bit more lenient if the trains are picking up the recycled scrap. At first, I was planning to just use this island on the left for sorting and then send items onto a different island. But just like my life in general, plans are just quaint delusions that don't have any bearing on the real world. And this island is about to turn into a bowl of spaghetti so disgusting that even Mario would rethink his entire life. The first thing I want to accomplish now is to set up production for these electromagnetic plants. As you can see here, they're very expensive and can only be made on this planet, but definitely worth it. Not to mention that electromagnetic science packs can only be made in these. Admittedly, very limited in what they can produce, but the things they can produce, they produce very well. Let me show you the production graph on the test setup. Here I have 10 assemblers and 10 plants. I previously ran the two groups by themselves for a little while to get some data. The first plateau you see here is a green circuit output of 10 assemblers, 1.5k under ideal circumstances. The plants manage 3.6k also under ideal circumstances. And sure, while that is pretty fast, that's not what we're interested in. If we look over to resource consumption, you can see that the increased consumption from using electromagnetic plants doesn't match the increased production. This is because it comes with a built-in 50% production increase, giving you one free item for every 2 you produce. To show you just how good this bonus is, here's a test setup where the buildings also produce their own wires. And as we expected, assemblers performed about the same, but with the productivity bonus applied to both the copper wires and the circuits, the electromagnetic plant ended up consuming the same number of copper plates while producing 140% more circuits. And that bonus also applies to items that normally cannot benefit from productivity. If these numbers aren't making intuitive sense, I made this graph to help you visualize it. Assemblers have a crafting speed of 1.25, and electromagnetic plants have a crafting speed of 2. The red section is the extra crafting output you get from the productivity bonus. This gives you a total crafting speed of 3, but you only pay for 2. The steel and processing units we need to produce them we already get from scrap recycling, which also gives us what we need for holmium plates. But if we want to turn the regular concrete we have into refined concrete, we're going to need iron plates. Which brings us to the second function of the recyclers, which is that you can recycle other items to get back 25% of the resources used to produce them. So we can easily get the iron plates we need by recycling these iron gears. Items that cannot be recycled down further, for example this solid fuel, has a 75% chance of being destroyed when put into a recycler. This is pretty important on Fulgora since you need to get rid of the items when you have no more space to store them. At this point, I've already ran out of belts. I could import more from my home planet, but lubricant production is very easy in this planet since the oceans are made out of heavy oil, and gears are plentiful. After finishing refined concrete, we have everything we need. I make sure to replace the assembler as soon as possible so I can get the productivity bonus. I'm also starting to run low on inserters now, which means that I'm going to need green circuits. In order to get them, we have a few options. We can get them by recycling red or blue circuits, or we can use some of the copper wire we get from the scrap recycling. I went with using the copper wire first, since I'm going to get a 50% production bonus. It's also a bit simpler since you don't need to handle all the extra outputs you get from recycling. Be aware that scrap recycling doesn't give you a lot of copper wire, and despite using electromagnetic plants, you'll get less than half the green circuits you will get from just recycling your blue circuits. I'm going to make some quality modules to put in my electromagnetic plant producing electromagnetic plants, hopefully resulting in some better quality electromagnetic plants. You may have noticed that I'm not using electromagnetic plants to produce my modules. This isn't for no reason. It's because I'm an individual that has a strong affinity for making mistakes. The ultimate end goal of this plant is to make electromagnetic science packs and send them back to Nauis. And for that, we're going to need supercapacitors. I made this flowchart to make things easier to understand, or more confusing, I'm not sure yet. Either way, we already have a few things we need for supercapacitors. We already have green circuits, batteries, and holmium plates. That leaves just electrolytes and superconductors. We can get copper plates from recycling low-density structures, copper wire, and batteries. Plastic we can also get from low-density structures or from red circuits. At the moment, we cannot craft plastic, and that's because we don't have access to coal. But if you go to Gleba first and research its technologies, then you can have a space platform in orbit that synthesizes coal for you and sends it down to the surface. Even though low-density structures is a much better source of both copper and plastic, I'm going to start by recycling the red circuits since I'm about to run out of storage space for them. Even though the days are very short, I've started running out of power during daytime. This will help me both alleviate some of my power problems and help me take care of some of the surplus fuel and ice. I am planning to make a lot of these superconductors, which means that usually I would avoid using a requester chest for this. But on Fulgora, things work a bit differently. If you're trapped in a small room that's gradually being filled with more and more spaghetti, shit's going to start flying sooner or later. And that superconductor's done. Very easy to make once you figured out the recycling. Electrolyte is also very simple to make. The biggest problem is getting enough holmium solution. The biggest problem with the holmium solution is, unsurprisingly, that you need holmium ore to make it. And you get it from recycling scrap, but just 1% of the time. And while the conclusion, so the item is rare, isn't necessarily wrong, I would say that the bigger problem is that you get 99 other items you have to handle. While editing just now, I realized there's something I should have done long ago. I went into the game and built this circuit, which checks if the belts are locked up, and if they're locked up for more than 10 seconds, it sounds an alarm. I'm going to describe how the circuit works in a moment, but first I just wanted to say that recording video and voiceover and editing everything so that it syncs up takes ages, so I'm going to try something new and just make a diagram and explain how it works live. I'm probably going to stutter quite a bit, so I'm going to preemptively say sorry for that. This is the timer circuit at the end. It continually counts upwards in the signal C, unless it receives the signal to reset back to 0 from the signal R. If the C signal reaches 600 or higher, this speaker will sound alarm. So the goal is to keep resetting this timer so that it doesn't sound alarm if things have changed. Now let's look at the circuitry that's responsible for resetting. First, we read a vertical slice of the belts and send the contents to these two decider combinators. This one is only responsible for taking the signal and sending it onwards, but delayed by 1 tick. This decider combinator then receives the previous tick's contents on the green wire and the current tick on the red wire. So then we take each signal on the red wire and compare to each signal on the green wire, and if anything has changed, then we can output an R signal to reset. We also have this signal, because we don't want the alarm to sound just because the belt is empty, and checking if items are 0 doesn't work, because a 0 signal doesn't show up the combinator at all. So we have to add this constant combinator that sends a -1 signal, so that we have a signal to check if the belts are actually empty. It took me quite a while to get the passable recording, but I still think it was quite a bit quicker. I was pretty annoyed here that the input and output pipes don't match up, but then I realized you can just flip them. And that reminded me of some other pipes that annoyed me, which unfortunately cannot be flipped. Considering we already have all the ingredients, electrolyte was very simple to make. We're still producing a very limited quantity of holmium solution, but at least it's being produced at a very steady rate. And now we can finally make the supercapacitors. That was almost the final step before we have science. The final step being that we have to start making accumulators, which are incredibly simple to make at this point. When making your accumulators, make sure not to make the mistake of using normal assemblers. And also, I suggest using some quality modules here. The ability to store more energy in a smaller space is very useful on planets like this. Since you need to build so many accumulators for science production, you could up to triple your power storage capacity by using only rare accumulators. My science production is ready. It doesn't look all that great, but it'll do for now. Here's something I should have done long ago. Start building a platform that transports the science back home. My other platform has worked well so far, so I'm going to make the new platform a copy of that one. While we're waiting for the space platform being built and science production, I did some menial stuff. Starting with making this blueprint that works the same as the one I showed you 20 minutes ago. Except, of course, that it's an electromagnetic band instead of an assembler. I also built some different recycling stations to get rid of stuff, so I wouldn't clog my sorting system. Made some jet fuel. Made some improvements to sort items quicker. Then traveled north to explore a bit. And found this island that has very high scrap density, so I set up a mining outpost. Since we're here, let's check out this island over to the west. And unsurprisingly, it's magnitudes bigger than the island I decided to build my factory on. Did I perhaps make a mistake by not going out and looking for a bigger island?
We don't make mistakes. We have happy accidents.
The platform I built for transporting science was running low on ammo, so I sent it back home with 3000 science. I started by researching the lightning collector. While there were many options that are more interesting, the lightning collector covers a larger area, and I did have problems with my bots getting struck by lightning between islands. I had done just about everything I wanted to accomplish on this planet, but first I needed a few more things. One of the things I wanted to do first was to make some high quality Fulgora specific materials. While waiting for those items to get made, I spent some time looking at how quality affects different items. And that's when I noticed something. If you watched part 1, you may remember that I complained that I had to go to Vulcanus in order to destroy cliffs. Turns out that was not true at all. I had the ability to destroy cliffs the entire time. I had never thought about nukes being able to destroy cliffs, because that's not what you use them for. At least not what you used them for before the update. You know what? I'm gonna go home and do that right now. I've installed some fuel tanks this time, so the return trip will be much quicker. I was hoping to bring some high quality holmium plates with me, but the production was taking way too long, so I put it off for later. And also, I can just recycle some of those high quality electromagnetic plants to get some. The first thing I'm going to do now that I'm back home is grab the resources I brought with me and make myself something special. You may notice that the equipment grid didn't get bigger when I switched armors. That's because this is the equipment grid of the old armor. And yes, I'm putting all the equipment I just took out back in. Seems like I've noticed that the equipment seems to fill the new equipment grid suspiciously well.
We don't make mistakes. We have happy accidents.
There we go, that makes more sense. Now I just also had to make some better equipment. This new power armor comes with a jetpack that automatically turns on when you step over something solid. Neat. I'm going to let those assemblers work for a moment and see if I can get some rare exoskeletons. In the meantime... feels pretty good if you don't think about how long that uranium could have fueled your factory. And also, I guess, how much of your factory you destroy in the process. If I want to destroy more cliffs, I'm gonna have to deconstruct these assemblers. It's going to take my bots ages to move all those circuits, so I'll go destroy something else in the meantime.
We don't make mistakes.
Okay guys, get your bets in now. How many times am I gonna make this mistake before this video is over? Jesus Christ. I survived, but my bots sure didn't. I really don't think I should be allowed to have nukes. To be fair, that's true for everyone. If I'm going to be stupid enough to run into my nukes all the time, I should at the very least make an effort to be tough enough to survive it. Ah, I'm learning. So it's very clear to me that my problem is patience. But don't worry, I'm going to figure this out in a moment. And by figure out, I don't mean that I'm suddenly going to start being patient, I mean I'm going to figure out how to do this quicker. Oh, look at that. Everyone be quiet, he's thinking. He's figured it out! He's figured out the secret of parallel movement. Why on earth did it take so long? Now, I can't remember the rest of what I recorded here, but I'm pretty sure this isn't the last time I've blown myself up. And I base that solely on the fact that I know this guy. I'm going to take a short break from blowing myself up to just blow someone else up. I mean, if you come across something like this and you have a nuke in your pocket, can you really say no? If anyone has watched this far, I'm not the only one who thinks that bullet damage is way too low when it's shot by the player, right? I think it would have been cool if there was some equipment that gave our guns the same damage bonus that turrets have. Maybe it could even make the submachine gun shoot automatically, so you could use a support weapon along with it. Would it be overpowered? Maybe, but still there's nothing stopping me from just putting down 20 turrets right now, and I could also just use nukes. I took a lot of damage there, which is surprising considering I made a lot of energy shields earlier, but then again, not so surprising considering I forgot to equip them. Here's another sad fact of life if you're living on Avis. If you're a fish and get lifted out of water, you can never return. The water physically rejects you. I'll leave them here and hopefully they can find a new path in life.
Well, you ain't got no legs, Lieutenant Dane.
That's a fair point. I should probably get Dan some legs first. This episode is starting to get a bit long, so it's probably time to let the trains pick on your planet. I do still have like 10 hours of footage here, but I remember there not being too much interesting happening. Mostly just setting up new mining outposts and modifying blueprints like you're seeing right here. And also I guess I spent like 2 hours at some point making the map go from this to this. If you're wondering what that looked like, it's just this. Just me running around with 100 bots following me, tasing the biters. Speaking of 100 bots with tasers, I was actually surprised by how efficient they were. Each of them dealt 58 electric damage, 3 times a second, and there were 100 of them. Over 17k DPS is pretty good. I'm not entirely sure how many biters died, but it's probably somewhere between 35,000 and 40,000 and about 6,000 nests. On the bright side, if you look at the graph, you can see that it really calmed down after that. Okay, but now it's really time to start rounding off this video. As you can see here, I polished off the planet picker blueprint a bit, added some colors and signs and removed all the combinators that didn't actually do anything anymore, which was just about every single one. Now it's just a constant combinator with the initials of the planets and a selector combinator that selects a random one. It looks a lot tidier than my old one, but I wish my old one still worked. I like that one. Let's just send the train. I don't really care if it's Gleb or Volcanos this time. Ah crap, I don't have any coal on me. Here, have some wood. It's like coal, but younger. Ah, we're going to Gleba. Blah, 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 blah. Congratulations! You've reached the bonus blueprint section. If you want to leave, you can do that, like a coward. Let me give you a quick rundown on how it works. Each one of these blueprints produces one item, and when I place down the blueprint, it asks me what item I want to produce. And I have different versions depending on how many ingredients that item has. This is going to be very handy if I need to produce a new item and I'm not on the planet. As you can see in this example, when I placed down the blueprint, I chose tanks, and now all the assemblers are set to produce tanks. In addition, this topmost station is now set to provide the product of this blueprint to the entire train network. It can do this because this provider station also has an icon in its name that can be replaced with the product. The same goes for the rest of the stations, but these request the ingredients. If you want to set up something like this yourself, let me give you an example. First, I'll make a blueprint of this. At the moment, of course, it can only produce tanks. Remember to turn on this option so that the blueprint remembers the train station names. And now, go into the parameter settings and set the tank to be a parameter. The tank is now set to be parameter 0. And now when I set the ingredients to be parameters, I can also set them to be an ingredient of parameter 0. When you make something into a parameter like this, all instances of that icon will be replaced. So far, the only exception I found is that the modules that you've inserted in the buildings can't be turned into a parameter. When I put down this blueprint now, it asks me to define parameter 0. In this case, I choose personal roboport because it also has 4 ingredients. And as you can see, all the icons in the train station names and the production buildings have changed. My train stations are dependent on combinators to work, and the icons in these also changes. And now, an important detail about how the parameters work. You can change the order of the parameters, and if you want something to be an ingredient of a parameter, it has to come after it. Parameter 0, as we know, is the product, and parameter 1 is an ingredient of parameter 0. If I move parameter 1 above parameter 0, I can no longer choose parameter 1 to be an ingredient of parameter 0. So when you're setting up your parameters, make sure things are in the correct order. Let me show you a different version that's also very useful. If you have logistics researched and you need to produce something but not in a very large quantity, then you probably recognize this setup. Using this blueprint can be made even simpler using parameters. To make the blueprint, first put down an assembler that produces something, it doesn't matter what. And then have the blue chest request a bunch of stuff at a reasonable quantity. Make a blueprint of it, then go to parameter settings and make sure that the product of the assembler is at the top. And then make the product into a parameter, and all the items in the blue chest also parameters that are ingredients of parameter 0. And now when you put down the blueprint, the game asks you what you want to make and takes care of the rest. Okay, that's all I had for this one. Bye!